Croatia versus France. This was it. The finals. And we'd somehow managed to time it perfectly so that we'd be in the Croatian capital, Zagreb, for the 2018 World Cup final. We crossed the border after our adventures in Slovenia, and the atmosphere was instantly electric. Everywhere you turned was the red and white checkered flag, and I mean everywhere. We had a bit of a rough start, to be honest. First of all, our knowledge of the country was like zero. It took me a while to realise that Hrvatska was just what they say for Croatia in Croatian, which is obviously very embarrassing. Also, we stupidly assumed that they had the euro here, which was completely wrong. I mean, people give Americans a hard time for being daft tourists, but look at us, a couple of absolute plonkers. Our Airbnbs that we'd booked fell through, most likely because of the hosts were taking their own flat to have a place to party for the finals. We opted to stay at a campsite outside of the city, but it wasn't too far, but even there it was still proper heathen. In the morning we locked up our bikes and ventured into the city for a day of football related activities, meaning drinking. Zagreb had been completely transformed into a red and white checkered monster. We walked about trying to figure out the best place to watch the match. With each passing moment, more and more people arrived. In the main square, the madness had already set in, with a humongous amount of beer being consumed everywhere you looked. It was chaos, but like really fun chaos. We cut about looking for stickers, obviously, then eventually settled in a good spot where we could have a seat and watch the game. It was a decent match, but Lily was obviously supporting France, which made things a bit tense. When France took the win, I sort of expected a bit of a party, but an air of disappointment, a sort of bittersweet atmosphere. But I could not have been more wrong. I mean, the explosion of partying, singing, cheering, dancing, screaming, and more singing of the same 5 songs on repeat was immense. There's absolutely no way you could tell that they'd lost. The fact that they were second was enough to go absolutely mental. I've honestly never seen anything like it. I mean, look at this. Check these mad cars. This guy has turned his car into a hog roast. What is going on?
Currently in Zagreb. We have just watched the final, Croatia-France, in an open beer garden or something like that. It was the most stressful moment of our journey because I had to pretend I was not cheering for France. And when Croatia scored, Ryan tried to force me to stand up and cheer for Croatia. I didn't. And I was right.
We stayed in the city for as long as we could bear the songs and then head back to the campsite exhausted and a little bit steaming. The next day we decided to pack up and explore the city a bit without the crowds. But when we cycled into the centre, it was probably even busier than it had been the day before, and people were still going crazy, boozing more and more. I, for some reason, got fixated on getting a map and led us straight into the main square again, but this time with fully loaded touring bikes. It was obviously so stupid to have done this, but as we got close, the crowd behind us kept growing and it felt so hard for us to turn back. And so it made more sense at the time to just keep heading into the square and try to slip round to the left. But it did not work, and it was so intense. Like, imagine going into a packed concert with giant bikes and expecting people to move out your way. It was honestly awful, probably one of the worst moments of the trip. We were desperately inching along trying to get out. At one point this Aussie guy just turned to us and was like, "You're fucking wankers," which I thought was a bit unfair, but at the same time he kind of had a point. These shots are from the day before, but imagine this, but much worse. We eventually managed to escape as the crowds continued to swell. Out of the centre, we were like, let's get out of here right now. We hit the main boulevard and it was lined with supporters, all screaming and singing as they waited for the team to arrive by plane. We did actually see the plane coming into land, and it was actually, I kid you not, being flanked by fighter jets. Out of the city, things calmed, and finally we had a bit of room to breathe. It was really late, so we quickly looked for a place to wild camp and found a spot near some fields which were home to some very aggressive mosquitoes. The next day was pretty eventless. We made our way east for about 100 kilometres. The roads were fine, but there wasn't really much going on, to be honest. We stopped at a super nice campsite near the border, which was pretty chilled out, and the owner was dead nice and gave us a couple of beers the next day when we left. The campsite also had some stork's nests, which I'd become obsessed with spotting as we continued along those roads. The next day we set off again, enjoying some pastry snacks along the way as we continued east. Remarkably, I got my first and last flat tyre of the trip that day. We also spent ages befriending this dog, which was super cute. Things quickly turned sour though when he stole my pants. Lily ran after him and found the two of them doing a pants tug of war, which was hilarious. At least it is now. At the time I was actually pretty annoyed because I didn't really pack a lot of underwear, and now this pair had a massive hole in them. I was absolutely raging. Anyway, we continued along the road and got to Nova Gradiška and stopped there for a coffee at a wee bar. The locals were clearly curious, and one came out and pretended to be a waiter so he could ask us questions and get another look and see what we were all about. We went to leave and this guy was walking into the bar and turned and saw us with the bikes and was like, "Hey, this is it." I was like, "Oh my god, what is it?" He said, "This is it. This is something special. Come now, this is it." And we were like, okay, I mean, let's go back in. He's right, this is it. He was very convincing. Inside they were desperate to give us booze, but we still had like 60 kilometers to ride to Slavonski Brod, so we opted for more coffee, and they were all talking at once about the countries they hated and liked, why we shouldn't go to Serbia, and that it was okay that we were Scottish, whilst the dude from outside just kept repeating, "This is it, this is something special, this is it." We left absolutely buzzed, high on coffee and also thinking like, this is something special and we're so lucky to be doing this. We absolutely zoomed our way to Slavonski Brod, driven by caffeine and positive vibes. As we approached the city though, we got the fear as the sounds of the national song started blaring out again, and then fireworks started going off. It turned out one of the football players was from this town and was heading home, and so it was in full party mode, and we just could not escape the World Cup at this point. We managed to sneak away and find a recreational park to camp in, and after another mega mosquito attack, settled in for the night. In the morning, we started heading to Vukovar, where we joined the Danube River and crossed the border at Baka Palanka into Serbia. The riding was pretty monotonous, to be honest, and it had been for a few days. When you think about Croatia, what comes to mind? Dubrovnik? The famous beautiful coastlines? Game of Thrones sets? I'd never been before, so I guess I just knew it's supposed to have a great coast, and I knew that Zagreb was the capital, but I honestly didn't really know much else about it and what had happened in the war as well. It was shocking to see the damage that was still very present, with buildings pockmarked with bullet holes and just the level of dilapidation as we continued east. As we got closer and closer to Vukovar and the Danube, you also just kept seeing signs for mass grave sites. It was a really sad thing to see, and as a bike tour, all you can really do is look and try to find out more and try to understand what happened. The good news is though, that with this kind of travelling you are sort of protected, in that most people in the country will take you in, even if that is just to convince you that the other side was wrong, but you do get kind of shielded from having to take sides and are able to just experience it for yourself. Throughout our time in these countries, we had only good experiences with the locals despite what they said about each other. In the evening we found a spot to wild camp near some crops again, making sure to get up super early before anyone came looking. In the morning, we attempted to follow the Eurovelo route, which was pretty hard to tell whether we were on it or not. The border approached and we were super excited to get our passport stamped as we made our way into Serbia. We'd end up following the river all the way into Romania and then eventually join it again at its delta where it meets the Black Sea. Of course, you'll need to subscribe to this channel to make sure you don't miss out on that. Thank you so much again for watching, and if you've ever cycled in Croatia, drop me a message below in the comments. And remember, this is it. And this is something special.